Hello and welcome to That Tech Show, the show that reveals the magicians behind the magic that is everyday technology. Good morning, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm all right, Sam. How are you?
I'm very good. It's pre-8 a.m. ramble, which is uncommon.
Yes, uncommon, uncomfortable. Although I'm trying to get myself into a new rhythm. Normally, I wouldn't even be awake by this time in the morning, but since coming back off holiday from Greece, I'm trying to get into a bit of a fitness bent. So I've been up at 6:30, 7 o'clock every day, trying to go out for a run.
Wow.
Doing 5 miles or something like that. Trying hard.
You're a mile person then. You're not tracking kilometers.
No, I'm not actually even tracking miles, I actually put a podcast on and I go and listen to it.
You're a time-based runner.
I'm a time-based runner, yeah. I've been trying to do an hour. And then I've got this great kit for inside as well. It's called a TRX. It's a strap system. And you sort of hook it onto the back of your door, or actually a real hook if you've got one. And then you can work out pretty much every exercise you can figure out. You can work using this strap system. But yeah, the guy I was training with in Greece showed me how to use this stuff, and it's cool. I like it because it's not like normal gym stuff. Because since coming back, I've been trying to go to the gym, and I just hate having all of the other people around. I feel like everybody's watching. They're probably not. They probably don't care.
And coughing and sneezing.
Yeah, post-COVID gym is not cool, really.
Yeah, and presumably this piece of technology is smart to some capacity. You can track it on your phone as opposed to a little dial on it or something like that.
No, it's literally like a strap with 2 hooks on the end or 2 handles on the end.
How do you track your progress or whatever it is?
I don't track my progress at all,
Oh, okay, fine.
I think the thing is, I put on a bit of weight through COVID like everybody else had. The weird thing is, I feel different, I feel better, but my weight is not changing. What is it they say? That you don't notice that you're burning the fat because you're building muscle. But actually, I did look this up. And so you can burn 1 to 2 pounds of fat a week, but you can only put on 0.2 pounds of muscle. So something's not happening.
Yeah, something's not working. Well, I'm similarly, over COVID and stuff like that, I picked up running and I was doing lots of running, and my girlfriend actually ran the Berlin Marathon last weekend. So kudos to her, sub 4 hours, which is impressive. But anyway, both picked up running and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And then over the last few months, I've been using resistant bands that hook onto my door and doing those every morning, and really enjoying that and noticing a big benefit on the mental health side of things, and really enjoyed it, actually, tracking my progress. And
so how do you track your progress with a resistance band then?
I just write it down.
Oh, okay.
So I count how many reps, but I think I got into a rhythm. I'm not a hardcore gym goer. I just wanted to maintain this physique that I have.
And what a physique.
For those listening, I have a physique. But as we've mentioned this morning, pre-8 a.m. as the clocks draw in, it starts to become increasingly difficult to wake up and be energetic in the morning. So the last few weeks have been pretty shameful. I think I'm a summertime gym goer or exerciser. And I don't know, I'm going to try go for a run this weekend. I have had a cold, as maybe why you might hear something in my voice. I definitely had a voice in the intro for last week's episode. But hopefully going to pick up the pace and try not let the winter time put an end to my exercise. So, but anyway, we have a show lined up today.
Oh yeah, so we do, don't we? That's why we're here.
Who have we got on the show today?
So today we have Rakesh Ravuri. Now, Rakesh and I met back in 2013 when we both worked together at Tesco. I was young, fresh out of Amazon at the time, and perhaps a bit brash, egotistical, opinionated, and as if I've changed in any other way.
I was going to say, you haven't changed.
Other than getting older. So initially, I think I probably rubbed him up the wrong way. But I think over the next sort of 18 months or so, we at least developed, I hope, a mutual respect, enough that he'd accept our invite to join us as a guest on the show anyway. And so I'm glad that he's been able to join us today, or he's going to join us today, because he's a really smart guy and maybe the only person I know that has code running in space. So hopefully we'll get into that. But also what he's been doing since we last spoke at Tesco, now that he's left the UK, gone back to India, and he's serving as the CTO for Publicis Sapient via a stint as a director at Amazon.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it should be cool.
Well, he's in the waiting room, so I'll let him in, and then we can crack on with today's episode.
Hi, my name is Rakesh Ravuri. I describe myself as an executive coder. I've been in the IT industry for more than about 30 years right now. Originally started as a mechanical engineer, wanted to be a robo scientist, but now I ended up selling beans on e-commerce websites. I have worked in companies like Tesco, where I built their online grocery platforms and marketplaces, then worked in Amazon, building their whole shipping juggernaut, if I should call that word. Worked in the area of finance systems with companies like Citadel, been in the middle of mortgage crises in late 2008-9 timeframe. Been quite an exciting journey, but here I am. So what do you want to talk today?
Nice.
Well, the selling beans, that one, I've not heard that for so long. Because, I mean, I don't know how long it's been since we probably last spoke. I mean, what, like 7 or 8 years, something along those lines? But I think...
About 8 years.
But I think selling beans was something we talked about on a daily basis because we were at Tesco together.
Yeah, so that selling beans stuck to me because, as you remember, Chris, whenever we went with a proposal, our CIOs and the other leaders used to make this comment: do you know how many cans of beans I need to sell to make this project reality? So I think it sounded pretty interesting to me, and I always use that whenever I talk to my teams, especially working in the area of grocery, because it's a low margin business. People don't understand what it takes to generate that kind of revenue.
How does the selling beans translate in other industries then? Because groceries, yeah, makes perfect sense. But say, other teams, how does that translate?
It is the same thing, right? Like you, as a engineer, engineers tend to look at shiny objects, the latest technologies and cool things. They sometimes forget about what the real business needs to do in order to generate the amount of sales or amount of revenue which is required. So if you're in a clothing manufacturer, it's the same thing, right? Like you need to see what type of organization you're working with. If you're working with a luxury segment, yes, of course. Some of the France companies which we work with, they sell a white T-shirt for $1,000, a different ballgame. But there are others who sell a small T-shirt and make 50 cents on it, right, as a margin. So then you need to think about the volume and the range and the assortment, what they need to sort of create in order to generate the total cost of ownership of the system which they're building.
It's a really interesting mechanism, though, isn't it? Because it sort of like breaks it down into the lowest common denominator of like, we are just selling beans, which I quite liked. I suppose that is different, though, if you're selling $1,000 T-shirt. How many $1,000 T-shirts is this going to cost?
That's an easy conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can measure it quite easily. I'd forgotten about that. So anyway, you described yourself as an executive coder. What do you mean by that? Because that's a cracking term that I've not heard before.
The reason why I use that term, actually, I use that as a Twitter one-liner to describe myself, and that's where it stuck. The reason why I use that is right now I'm playing the role of a chief technology officer in Publicis Sapient. And yeah, obviously chief technology officer in most of the companies is considered as an executive role in different companies. But at heart, I'm still a coder. That is what I do whenever I get few minutes. I always have a coding window open somewhere, and I continue doing that. And early in my career, I remember back about 15 years back or maybe more, people told me saying that if you want to progress in your career, you need to stop coding and get into management, and that is the only way you can grow. I never liked that statement. I was like, why should I stop something which I'm good at, right? Like there'll always be opportunities, and people will need experienced coders too. So I always remind people saying that even though I'm an executive, I'm a coder. So that's why I call myself an executive coder, right?
So how much time in a day do you spend actually coding then? Like what if you were to split it by percentage, like how much time do you actually get to be hands-on keyboard?
again, this is something similar to what I tell people, right? How much time do you spend reading if you like reading, right? I'm okay. Roughly, if you have to put in terms of time frames, I think I spend at least 2 to 3 hours. Of course, it's not enough to get 2 to 3 hours stretch unless I work in the nights or weekends. But these are like split over 15-minute periods or half an hour here and there when a meeting gets cancelled or I get some time, finish my early lunch, or during lunch I want to try something out. So yeah, on an average, I still spend about 2 to 3 hours coding every day.
That's interesting that you do it in like 15-minute blocks, though. Like, how much do you actually get done in a 15-minute block? Because I think there's so many people that get into, like, you have to get into a zone and you have to do it for quite a long time, you know, before you can finish something. So have you got any, like, how do you do that? Have you got any tips, tricks to how to just do 15 minutes and then context switch to actually being a normal human being that can converse with regular people again?
And pick up where you left off as well, right?
Yeah, no, that's a quite good point, right? It's not like it's always split into 15-minute periods, but you need to look at the nature of coding which I'm doing, right? I'm not doing coding where I'm a part of a full-time team trying to deliver some stories or like trying to finish some tasks. Most of my coding is in order to understand a concept or trying to learn a new concept or to see a new way of doing things. So for me, those blocks work fine, right? Like, and nowadays with all this cloud and automation and the level of the technology progress which we have, you can accomplish quite a bit in 15 minutes, right? Like I remember this, right? I was having a conference with all the new joiners a year back, I think, in Publicis Sapient, wherein they were asking me, saying that, can we talk to engineers about real world engineering and what can be done in short time? So I created an application in 30 minutes, deployed it in cloud, and it's a mobile application, web application, including what you can say, authentication, authorization, you name it, right? Wow. So the tools which are available right now, in 30 minutes, I could do live coding to develop an application which works in 4 platforms, basically iOS, Windows, Android, and the web. At the same time, deployed on the cloud, and every check-in which I'm making is going to GitHub, and it's getting pulled by Cloud Build and building it and creating binaries and getting pushed it. It was easy, right? Like it could be done, right? Like So
I think most people could certainly do that within a couple of hours, because I think, you know, that's where the world has moved on to. But this is also why we're talking to you, because you could probably do that in about, you know, a quarter of the time that a normal human can.
No, but again, right? Obviously, right? If it's if it's an application, if it's a commercial application, obviously you'll spend more time on it. But what I'm trying to say is the tools are available at our fingertips, which you're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? That's what I tell people. Like, in a similar concept, there is so much at your disposal. Earlier, I remember in 2000 when I had to set up a web server, it took me 3 days, right? To connect the wires, connect the router, reformat the machine, and still it didn't work, I guess, right?
So I mean, I want to go back into that sort of thing you were talking about you know, having to make that decision to either sort of move into management, because that's a common thing. Like, I think, you know, if we've got some people early on in their career listening to this, or maybe some people who were late on in their career who had to make this decision, it kind of feels like one of those things, right? You're going to at some point have to make a decision that if you want to progress, you're going to move into management. And I think that's changed, right? It's certainly in a lot of companies. You know, how did you sort of navigate that? Because I think when you were talking about this sort of 15 years ago, there probably weren't many companies out there that were actually giving you that option to progress to doing a role like you're doing now at Publicis Sapient, where you can be hands-on and all that sort of stuff. You'd expect to have moved into just pure management, and you'd be going, well, back in the day when I used to write in Perl, you know, which, you know, or another sort of similarly maybe Oh, I'm offending Pearl people now in a dead language. You're digging myself out of a hole here. No, but you'd expect that you'd be going, oh, well, when I used to code 15 years ago, it used to be like this. Because there's a load of people out there like that. I mean, how did you sort of navigate that? Did you just know that you could progress into a more senior position, still remain hands-on? Or did you find the right organization that would support you in that vision? Or
yeah, so it's an interesting question, right? Actually, I made a choice of doing something which I love, and I always felt that if you do something you love and you're good at it, people will pay for it, right? Like if you're good at it, you'll always get paid for it. And that's what I thought. I never planned for it, but luckily I was in a period of time when this is something which I also talk to a lot of my clients, and now it's happening. No, I no longer need to talk. Everyone knows this. IT has moved from a back office department to being in the boardrooms, driving the organizations. Right now, like if you see the top 5 companies, right, in terms of revenue, right, who are those companies, right? Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon. These are all tech companies. That's the definition, right? Like I remember, like when we were working in a retail company, and when we suggested something, people used to say, "We are not a tech company; we are a retail company." No retail company right now lifts their hands and says that, right? Like everyone wants to be a tech company. So I guess being in this era helped me right now, saying that okay, now tech has to be in the executive board, right? There's no choice. Like everyone understands that if your business strategy is not influenced heavily by a tech-driven strategy, then your business strategy is not really current, right? Like those days where business strategy was done by business people, and then tech was a tool to just help in automating or like accelerating some of the pieces. That was 90s and early 2000s. That is gone. Nowadays, companies clearly, and the Wall Street, everyone asks you, like saying that, okay, what is your tech strategy to take on your competitors, startups, or whatever it is, right? Like they want to see how a company uses tech, and that is how the company is valued. So,
do you think it's completely gone, or with your work at Publicis Sapient, are you seeing clients that still need to come across that cross that chasm?
Yeah, but they still had to cross the chasm before COVID, but after COVID, it has completely wiped it out, right? Like, actually, COVID has helped enormously in that picture. I keep telling to people, right? I start the conversation in step 2, whereas like 2 years back or 3 years back, when I started the conversation, I used to tell them about how much their company needs to also have tech strategy as an equal partner, or like digital transformation as an equal partner. That is no longer required for me, right? Everyone understands the implications, and COVID helped them to clear the, acted as a wiper, if you can call it, clean the windshield, and everyone can see clearly now. So.
Yeah, because everybody did really have to make a significant leap. I mean, obviously, we're doing this call via Zoom because you're in India. So, I think a lot of people would have had to, loads of people have, I mean, Zoom's just grown dramatically because people have had to use it. That's really interesting that they've had to, that it's moved people on that far.
Yeah, see, I read somewhere this statement, and I really like that statement. They say that most of the disruptive technologies don't happen when the technology is first created, right? They happen because of some events which makes the technology relevant. So Zoom was there like 3 years before. I remember I had a Zoom account before COVID, and it was actually, I liked it as software to tell companies, maybe we should use this instead of Skype, right? Remember Skype was there, things like that. But when COVID hit and people had to use, they picked a software which is easy for the masses, right? Like, my mom uses Zoom right now, right? And she had no clue about video conferencing before this. But my 6-year-old daughter now attends school on Teams, and they are so computer savvy because they were forced to do this. So what's happening is now everyone saw this, right? They can see their parents using it. They can see their kids using it. They are seeing everyone relying on digital technology. So companies have is very clear. That's why the vision is very clear. They can see it like happening right in front of them, and they said, okay, if you really have to survive in this brave new world, you need to be digital, right? Like there's no other choice. And most of the industries, at least all the customer-facing industries, I'm not seeing any problems or laggards, right? It is very clear. There are still some industries which are on B2B side or industries which are in back office side, like basically like they may not still understand the digital revolution, or they are not, they know that something is coming, but they're still not seeing the implications.
So has that changed the nature of the conversation with your existing clients as well, rather than just the ones that you had, the new ones that you were saying where you start at step 2?
Yes.
How's that changed for those clients then?
So for existing clients, it is it's a different conversation, right? It's not about like they're already in a digital world, but when sometimes like I talk to them about implementing or speeding up their CI/CD so that they can do say 100 builds every hour. Earlier, they could have said that, look, maybe for Google and Amazon that's required, but for my company, I never need 100 builds to be said. It's okay for me if I do a weekly build, right? Why are you investing in this, creating this cloud-based the CI/CD pipeline to optimize my go to production? I'm not needed. But during COVID, they realized like how the faster they make changes, the smoother the things are automated. So the conversation in already digital companies, okay, it is not the question of only high tech. It is the norm, right? Like, so we need to automate everything. We need to be at the state of the art. So that is the difference in conversation with the existing companies. For companies which are not even digital, they are scrambling to be digital. But the companies which are already digital, they have seen the peaks, right? Like COVID has some of our, I can tell you, grocery clients, you will not believe it, right? They had 10x the amount of orders in a couple of days because of COVID. Everyone, when the lockdown happened, everyone started ordering groceries online, right? Like, so if you already had a website, you are like, I never have to bother about auto scaling. Well, now you do, right? You suddenly are seeing a massive demand. And also things like regulations, right? Like there were a lot of regulation initially, right? Saying that the companies had to support, saying the number of people in the organization, number of people who are coming to shopping. When those regulations came, that means every regulation means there's a change in your operating system or business workflow, or you have to code something new. And when you have to code something new, you need the agility, right? And to need the agility, you need automation and auto scaling. All those things will come into picture. And that is when they realize that, it's no longer about just Google or Microsoft. Every company needs to offer in that way. So
just listening to what you're saying there, it sounds like we've sort of had quite a spontaneous boom in technical understanding just because of COVID. That's quite profound, really.
Yeah, so it's not about understanding. That's why I use the analogy of windshield wiper cleaning. It was always there. It is just that clarity has been achieved and people could see it, right? People can see it happening, so they understand the implications. Earlier, it was like we are asking them to take a leap of faith, saying that you will require it, you will need it. So then they were like, no, I don't see it. But now when they see this happening, it's no longer about convincing them. They can see it. It's happening in front of them, right? So that is what I said. It's more about clarity, less about understanding, right? Like the clarity has been achieved, right? Like people can clearly see the applications.
It's tangible.
I wonder if there's, I was going to say, I wonder if there's some sort of analogy to change there, in the way that people have this natural fear for change, or a lot of people have natural fear for change. Then you've got this sort of enforced change that comes along where we're all locked up in our homes for however many months, depending on which country you were in. And, why not just change everything and go and, start playing with all these new technologies like Zoom and ordering groceries online for the first time and all those sort of things. Like, the thing that struck me as well whilst you were talking is if you take the schools, like around the world, every school has gone to being virtual pretty much. And, schools are a place where, well, certainly in parts of the UK that I'm familiar with, my mum's a school teacher, they are so far behind in technology, and yet somehow they've all gone, oh, we can all just use Zoom. And no one taught them to do that, I don't think. I don't think there's many, you'll be able to tell us from a consultancy perspective, but I don't think many consultancies had like schools as clients. Like they just got on with it and just did it. Like, it is quite easy to use, but I wonder if that everything is changing, so we'll just keep adopting change. Maybe that was the impetus that we needed to get that windscreen wiper, as you said, to just clear the vision and go, oh look, there's all the technology that we can use. Actually, it doesn't need education. You can just use it because it's really intuitive.
Yeah. So see, impetus for change always happens when there is an external forcing factor, right? Most of the times people look back in history and say things like world wars were always impetus for change. Like there's always a step change when a world war happened, or things which caused disruption, right? And then people adopted the technologies which are already being used, but they were only for early adopters, became mass adopters. So I think COVID helped us do a war-like situation, right? Like it created that push to create a disruption. So I think these kind of disruptions are actually good for the industry. Like at least in my industry, like mostly when I work in the digital space, we took a 5-year leap, right? That's what it is, right? It took a 5-year leap, right? Like it doesn't mean that things like people will not go back to schools or something. No, that will still happen. But even when people go back to schools, there will be a lot more of online assignments, like online work, which will get allocated to people because it can be done, right? So like schools forever will adopt digital, right? There'll no longer be a school wherein before this, if I asked you, like, does my child have an school account? Maybe only the people in the higher standards, or like people who are working engineering degrees, they had an school issued account. Right now, every child from grade 1 has a school account, right? So I'm talking about that kind of change, right? Like, and same thing in India. If I take an example, 7 years back, the government came up with a scheme. They just banned a couple of notes overnight. They said like there will be no 1,000 rupee note and there will be no 500 rupee note, because they were saying that there were a lot of counterfeiting and people were hoarding cash, and so without paying taxes. So that was the reason given. But like overnight, they announced that from tomorrow these notes will not be valid. You will be given a very brief time to go and exchange it, because if people are illegal, they can't exchange it, right? Like you will be asked where the money come from. So that was an intention. But what it forced people is, because there was lack of cash, everyone started using a mobile-based payment mechanism, right? QR-based code, because like you couldn't withdraw cash from ATMs, right? Because the money was not even printed. But that disruption caused India to become so digital in payment. It's amazing, right? Like earlier, I used to go and buy something. It was always cash, right? Like now I can go to the smallest of vendor who has like a 4x4 foot a stall who's selling tea, and he accepts a Google Pay or like a payment mechanism online, right? So this kind of disruptions will force things to adopt. When people could have made arguments saying that this technology, a tea vendor will never sell. That used to be the arguments, right? Like before. But when a disruption happened, everyone adapted it, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
With all this clarity that's happened with businesses knowing tech and all the rest of it, how has your role changed? Like, has your role become easier? Have you had to adjust what you do?
Well, my role has become, see, what I was doing, I'm continuing doing the same thing. It has not changed, like if I ask me, right? But it has become harder because there's so much demand right now. Like there is a war for talent going on, which you must have heard everywhere, right? Because every company realized that they need to upgrade their systems and be more digital. So anyone who is working in the digital space or in the IT space right now are there in huge demand. So if the demand spikes up, obviously the supply will take some time to catch on. So right now, my biggest challenge is finding enough people to execute the stuff which I need to execute. But it has become easier in terms of convincing people why they need to do that. That part became easier. The execution became harder, right? So.
Yeah, because we recently spoke to the CTO of a company called Naked Wines, and he explained that he enjoys that challenge of explaining and trying to win
Yeah.
these technical solutions that traditionally have been so hard to try and convince the business that they need to implement. But now that's kind of removed. I guess someone like him would maybe won't enjoy his job as much. But then now you can focus on building the tech. The difficulty is the teams, like you say, right? Is finding those people to implement. And how do you go about finding them? Are you part of that hiring process, or the what's it called when you
recruitment?
Vetting is the word. Vetting. Are you part of the vetting process of finding these people?
That's a big part of my role, right? My part as a chief technology officer, I'm responsible for developing the engineering talent in my company. So when I say develop and hire, right? Like, so it is. So right now the biggest. Obviously, the supply is limited. So the only way you can scale is by training more people, right? So we are investing heavily into how do we fast track people to be more productive, right? How can we look at alternate streams of people and make them more digital savvy, right? So those are the things which we need to do. And obviously the expectations have gone up, right? Like, so it is not that like we have reduced, right? Like, people are trying to do more and more with digital, but at the same time, you need to make engineers like, it's almost like what we call it a factory, right? We need to create a factory which develops more engineers. So I'm involved in what I call capability development. How do I develop more engineering capability, and also how do I make them work? One of our company's vision was to make our company a world-class engineering firm. So that's a lofty goal to sort of set. So I spend a lot of time in helping the teams work the right way and also scaling up in the right way.
And so, wow. First of all, have you got a remote hiring strategy? Is Sapient looking for like onshore developers or offshore developers?
So right now we are open to everything.
Have to be.
Yeah. So right now, I think that's good for if you're an IT developer, you're in a great time right now, right? You're in a software engineer. There's no better time to be a software engineer. So right now we are very flexible. We are telling people you can work from anywhere you want. You can work at any time you want. Flexibility is something which we are providing all across the board, and it is not like a temporary change, right? We are committed to telling people, right, like, see, no longer there's a concept of you need to come to office, especially in Publicis Sapient, we told people that you can work remotely till whenever you want, and there's only a small what can you say, expectations like, okay, at least for like X number of days, you need to come to office if needed, right? So that like you maintain that human connection.
I think that's part of like that world-class engineering firm that you're talking about, isn't it? Is how are you going to work in this new normal of everybody is spread all over the globe? I mean, how are you managing that? I mean, are you just muddling through, trying to figure it out as you go along? Because I guess to an extent, like, we're developing new processes, right?
Yeah, so that is very interesting, Chris, right? Like, when we started about in April of 2020, I remember calling all my vice presidents and all my engineering leads and telling them, saying that, like, please start tracking more effectively your velocity of your teams, start tracking the wastage which is happening in your sprints, because those are the things which we might see because people are all remote. That's what we expected. That's what we thought we are going to do. So keep a close trap on production. So these were the instructions I gave to all of my leads because that's what I was worried about, saying that, okay, what is going to happen when we remote? And then when we evaluated 6 months later, and when I saw the trends, the productivity has actually improved. There were no issues with wastage. I thought like there will be wastage because of people not being present in the same rooms and the meetings and all. I didn't see any concept of wastage. People were more happy to the work-life balance has actually improved better because people were working in different times. They were able to sort of like if I'm working right now, I go and log my daughter into a class, and I come back and sit. It's just a 2 minutes thing, but it doesn't affect my work. Earlier, I had to take a day off if I had to attend a parents-teacher meeting, right? Like, or if I had to, arrange for some transport problem for my children, I need to go and do that. But so I didn't have problem with productivity. I didn't have problem with wastage. We didn't have any issues of maintaining the quality because most of the systems anyway we are developing on cloud, and we are having automation systems and all those things that continued as it is, right? And people, what we realized is earlier people used to say, oh, people are remote, the meetings are not effective, you can't brainstorm effectively. One of the biggest learnings I had was it was not effective if some people are in the room and some people are offline. When everyone is offline, it works beautifully, right? Like there's no problem of people getting noticed or people trying to make a point, because Zoom takes care of flashing the person who is talking on the screen. Like those things were already in place, and that happens automatically. So if a person is trying to talk, if you are there on a audio conference, I had these experiences, right, working with in previously like 10 years back. I used to be trying to make my point on the audio, but in the room, people are talking, no one cares, right? Like there are a couple of people on the phone, forgets about them because they can't see him. But right now, you can't forget. So I feel it has worked out. So right now, the logic, the rationale which most of the companies are using, and including my companies, we didn't see any problems. We didn't see any effects. And so why should we have to even go back to office? There is no reason for us. There is not a single reason for us telling that this doesn't work.
Yeah, I think there has been a massive uplift in productivity. I mean, from a development perspective, in London, for example, you're going to be commuting an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, no matter where you live in London, because it takes an hour to get anywhere. And I'm sure it's, from my experience of Bangalore, for example, it's worse.
Yeah, that is the best part, right? I just absolutely love the fact that I don't have to commute. And it has helped me, right? Like I got into a rhythm of exercising that at the part which I go into commute. Now I'm spending time exercising, right? So I just absolutely love it. I'm getting more time to code. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the exercising is a really important thing, I think, because again, that's part of that work-life balance. And then think about how many builds or deployments you could do within that 2 hours as well. But no, I think that's really interesting. I mean, the other thing I was going to touch on there as well is, when we were working together, it was in the UK, and obviously there was, the Bangalore office for Tesco, and there were definitely at the times, difficulties coordinating and sort of working remotely between London and Bangalore. Obviously, a load of that stuff has changed with the remote stuff. But I'm curious from you now being probably more so on the other side of it, because I imagine a lot of your clients are probably in the West now. Would that be true? I mean, like, how are you managing that sort of interaction between the UK or America or anywhere else in Europe versus India, and are you seeing it being different on the other side now, and especially post-COVID?
No, see, as I said, right, like the biggest challenge used to be mixed teams, right? When part of the team is in office and part of the team is remote, that becomes a challenge, because natural human tendency is to relate to something which is right in front of us, right? So you make those eye contact, you look at the body postures or something, and you tend to forget a box like which is a conference box which is right in the center, unless someone tries to scream saying that I have a point, can you sort of listen to me? And that's what I observed, right? And now what happening is, now since everyone is there on the same platform like a Zoom or a Teams when you're sort of using it, and the network has improved a lot, right? Right now you can see, right, like the way we are talking on the Zoom, the way I can see you and you can see me, it feels as if we are just sitting across the room, right? Like I don't see any big thing. The quality of service of networks have been has improved tremendously, and so he is working. The only challenge I see, which was always there, was the time zone challenge, right? Like so what happens is we need to maintain a effective time zone overlap of people working in different time zones, but that has always been there when for remote. But the other challenges have actually improved because now people are more receptive to remote people. So actually, in my case, the way I see it is the working style has actually improved because people understand how to work with remote people more easy, more better. Right? So.
I mean, India's always been attractive as an offshore place, I suppose, purely from, I think almost classed as like, it's going to be cheap if we work with the fellas out in India. Do you think that is still the case? Have things changed somewhere a bit there as well? Are people just... are you finding it more engaged with the Western clients now that there is this ease of interaction?
So the number one problem with Indian companies right now is I talked about talent, right? We are not getting it, and one of the reasons for talent is right now the companies in the West are okay with people working remotely. So all the salaries in Bangalore and India have gone through the roof. So
really?
the cost arbitrage which you're talking about has been completely shattered. That is one of our biggest disruptors out here right now. And this is no joke, right? You can look up on some of the articles. Every engineer has now a new offer of at least 50% of his salary rise. 50% is the normal. If someone gets a new job right now, he's guaranteed to get a 50% hike. The salaries have caused a shift change because one of the reasons what's happening is all the good developers are now getting paid remotely in what might be 3/4 of Western salary, but that is 2 times of Indian salary out here, right? Which used to be normal. So it's causing a huge disruption. So the Indian market, the cost arbitrage is like getting thrown out of the water, right? So,
well, that was one of the things that struck me when back when we were working at Tesco, is I couldn't believe how low some of the salaries were in India at the time. Especially when the quality of the engineers was so high, like. For the most part, like the difference in salary was just insane. I'm really glad to see that that's changing.
Yeah, see again, like this is a disruption which I don't know where it will end up in, right? One of the reasons people used India was like, I'm getting a cost arbitrage, so I can sort of do that. And always the salaries were tied to the location where you were in, because they used to say, what is your state tax, what is your living expense, and that is how the salaries were calculated, right? Like so the living cost obviously in Bangalore was a lot different than London, so that is the way people used to justify why the salaries were different from London to this one, even though they are doing the same work. That used to be the logic companies are using, and now that logic is being questioned. Now, if you are working remotely, so what does location mean? Right, so how can you tie your salary to location? I think a lot of big companies, including Google and Microsoft, right now are facing this challenge because even in US, they had different salaries in San Francisco and New York compared to, say, Atlanta or Texas. So now, if everyone is working remotely, so why should that person in San Francisco home office get paid more? Right, so it's a very interesting. I don't know where it will end up.
So, no, it's a really interesting
just
effect.
Because
though,
you chose to live in London, why should your salary be higher when you're doing the same? Right?
Because I've got to put up with living in London.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think this is an interesting developments which are happening right now. Right now, people don't have answers. Right. But the overall average salary has gone up because there's a leveling. There was a joke by one of the Indian startup founders, right? Pretty well followed founders. He was joking, saying that Bangalore has become too expensive. I'm trying to recruit engineers from the Bay Area, right? Like so. That's sort of.
No, I like that. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, I suppose there was still, thinking back, there was a lot of hiring that was going on where people would go to India on hiring events, and I'm thinking, like Amazon would go on a hiring event to India and then would find people they thought were really good, and they would relocate them to the Bay Area. So I suppose actually now it's cheaper for them to just go, oh, we'll give you a massive salary in India, but it'll still be cheaper than us relocating you to the Bay.
Exactly. And that is exactly what's happening. So the average salaries in India have gone up. The cost arbitrage for the companies might have reduced, but they're still getting it cheaper. They're still getting it cheaper than recruiting people. So that is going to cause a massive disruption in this job market. And in India, it's already happened, right? Like, so right now, it is so ridiculous. Like if you go for the last 1 year and see what is the average salary changes for say the top 50% of the developers, you will be shocked. Right? So
What effect does this actually have, like economically or socially in India? Because like developers at this point must be like rock stars in the sense that their salaries have gone through the roof. Is it a life of cocaine and excess, or I mean, how's it?
Thank God for lockdown, so they can't do that. That is very true, right? Like I was talking to the other day to some of my team members who are like, do I need to go to this other company because they're offering me 100% increase, right? Like, after some time there is no loyalty, or like there is no reasons you can give a person to stay when he's getting 100% increase in some other place. But I was telling him the same thing, saying that like, look, I don't know what's going to happen and how long this boom is going to last. So the only suggestion I can give is save that 100% money which you're getting, still continue living in your means. I don't know what you can say, how the world will change 2 years down the line, right? So there is going to be some correction or disruption which is going to happen, which I'm really worried about, right? Because anything which is up will also have it down, right? So right now it's the up time for all the engineers in India. But I have seen this happen in 98, 99. I was in US. You heard of the whole .com boom, right? At that time, I just graduated. I can tell you a story, right? Like I just graduated from my master's in 98. This is like, I was a fresh engineer, right? Obviously I had zero experience. So there were companies which were flying me all over US, and they were sending me limos to pick me up for an interview. And the interview was over a pool table. This is like the height of .com thing, right? Like if you're decently good, they treated you as royalty, right? I was like, dude, I was just a kid. I'm not even worked in real world anytime soon. And the way the kind of, what you can say, the red carpets which was rolled out to you. And I had a signing bonus, which was equivalent to my yearly salary, right? For my first job.
Wow.
And everyone knows the story, what happened in 2000 and all that, right? So I tell people like I've seen this happen, right? I know what's going to happen 2 years down the line. So.
Wow. The warning.
It's a total it's totally opposite for me, who started professional life in the midst of the financial crisis.
Yeah, true that.
I can tell you I wasn't being picked up by limos.
But right now it's a similar analogy, right? Like, so last 2 years, I can tell you a similar, right? The students who graduated last 2 years, they virtually didn't give any exams, right? They had online exams or something. Most of them were the universities and colleges and schools were forced to give a passing grade, or like, what you can say, everyone is graduated, right? Like there's no question of challenges. They were getting jobs on a platter, right? And these guys, like, so I tell them, okay, you didn't write any exams and you got like good jobs. You have no idea what life is, right?
No, it's crazy, right? But there's some very strange things happening as well socially. Like when I was at uni, I became vice president of my student union, which is like an elected role. You've got to go out and meet a lot of people. Generally, you're handing out lollipops and trying to convince them of sort of student level policies. But a friend of mine is still very, very active in the whole community. And he's been going out. He works as a consultant in student student unions, and they're having their first proper freshers weeks for 18 months, I guess, almost 2 years, where they've actually got to go and meet people in person. And they've got this new set of elected officers, and they don't know how to interact with people, like, physically. Like, they have won elections where they've had to convince people of certain policies, but actually they're going like, how do I meet someone? How do I say hello to someone? Because they've got to welcome all, as a student officer, you have to welcome all these people to a freshers event. You've got thousands of people coming through the door every day, and they actually can't stick their hand out and shake their hand and say, hi, how are you? Because the social norms have just broken down entirely. I mean, it's very strange. Like, all of these things have to recalibrate, I guess.
No, very true, right? Like, even like for us in consulting industries, we always used to tell people, okay, how do you dress to client meetings? How do you interact with clients? There's a certain etiquette you need to follow and all that. Now I feel that we need to take a refresher course to all of the people, right? They have no clue for the last 2 years. They never met any clients in person. They have never interacted, being in a boardroom and talking to people. All that is like going to be new skills.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone's only dressed from the waist up these days, I think. I mean, belt sales must have gone through the floor.
I don't know the last time I wore a full pant, right?
Well, exactly.
It's also like kids and noises and things in the background. I think we've all kind of adjusted to everyone actually has a life, and you might hear a washing machine in the background, or you might hear a screaming kid, or whatever it is. I think we're all getting used to these. We're all becoming more respective of people and as humans, as opposed to just we have this work face and everything is polished and everything is, the etiquettes are all there and stuff like that. So it's just interesting how that'll all, we've had to kind of adjust to that as well.
Yeah. So the way I put it is, you are right? Like we started seeing each other as humans, but also we realized what is important. That's why I was giving the analogy of war and a disruptive event. So when a war is going on, you focus on what is important rather than what has been like artificial, barriers which we created. Like, for example, who created this rule saying that you should not hear kids sound in a meeting, right? Like, so it is something which people have created, but then we realize that that's not important. That is not important, right? Like, when people are going through massive setbacks like COVID, that suddenly becomes those kind of norms which we had got questioned, and which is a good thing, right? So now people realize, like, okay, what is important? Let us concentrate on those and focus on that, right? So
it's very strange that we had to sort of remove ourselves from like the traditional social norms to be able to recognize one another as people. How strange. Yeah. How very odd. There's plenty of stuff I still want to touch on. So, I mean, I remember vaguely years ago that you were telling me about code in space. Like, this is a complete change of direction from what we've been talking about. But can you tell me about code in space? You've got code in space, right?
Yeah, so luckily I was in situations...
Casual, isn't it? Casual. Go on, carry on.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit of my history, right? Like, so I grew up in my father was a rocket scientist, right? A proper rocket scientist. So I grew up in a place in India, which is basically the launch center for all the rockets in India. So it's a small island, and that island is only meant to make and launch rockets. So my father was employed by the Indian Space Research Organization. So all my life I grew up there, right? So I was there in a very small island. There were about 1,000 families. That used to be the size of the whole island. It was surrounded on 3 sides by ocean, because obviously the rockets launch into the ocean, and one side was backwaters, right? So when the tide comes, it fills up the backwater, right? So it's virtually an island connected by a thin strip of land, and it served beautifully for India, right? It's secure location, it is isolated, it's all that. But so all my life I grew around all these rocket scientists, right? Like, so the people who make rockets. So my first internship was there in that, like when I was doing my engineering. So I made, so obviously when you do internship in a space organization, invariably whatever you do, at that time I was designing a part which was finally used in late 2000s to 2013. The part which I designed in 93.
Bloody hell.
So that part which because like it goes through so many tests and everything, right? So that was finally used by the rocket which launched the Indian satellite to the moon, right? So
oh wow.
So, but my part didn't go to the moon. It got burnt in the atmosphere. I made the fin of the rocket anyway. So my association with space started from that time, right? So while going to school, while going to engineering, I was working in that. And then when I did my master's, I did it in Texas A&M. Texas A&M is very close to Houston, which is NASA's headquarters, right? So my professor had some grants from the space, from NASA to develop some systems. So as a part of that, I was writing a piece of code which got deployed in the International Space Station, right? Like, so that was my story of my code being gone to space in two different countries, right? One in India and one in US, right? So.
Did you get a notification or something when, you say they wrote the code in 93 and it got launched and that? It was like, congratulations, your code is finally there.
No. I'm just, I'm for my own curiosity, obviously, I'm trying to follow it, right? Okay.
You don't get a GitHub badge because that's what the engineers on the Curiosity rover, you could have a little Mars Curiosity badge on your GitHub profile. You should design one for yourself and have your own one.
I got one badge in GitHub. I think most of the people got that for the Arctic Code Vault, right? Like so that is the only badge which I have. So now I can say 1,000 years down the line, my code still exists, right?
What's really cool. What's that badge for?
So GitHub stored all the code for future generations to view. So they have this vault, right? Like where they used to store seeds. In case something disaster happens, you can recover the seeds and reforest the whole earth. So they did the same thing. So they said that they want to preserve all the code so that if something happens, we can get the code back. So all the code which is open source and this one got saved. So when they took a snapshot of that, my code also happened to be there, like lots of people's, right? Like I think this one, like everyone who has there in GitHub and you have a MIT licensed code, you could have got that badge. So then you get the badge like saying that, okay, you are contributed to the Arctic Vault. Right, so.
Oh, I didn't know about that. I'm going to have to go and look that up because I was aware of the seed wallets because I think there was some concern a few years back that with all of the ice caps melting that it was going to expose them. And,
No, one of them was in danger of getting exposed. There are like multiple vaults. One of them is like getting close to getting exposed because the ice level is going down. So.
But anyway, back on that code in space. Am I right in thinking you told me that there was a lot that you had to do around the testing side of things and making sure that actually the code had fallback mechanisms?
Yeah. So what happens in the space is most of our processors get affected by cosmic rays, right? So cosmic rays happens even in Earth. It happens, right? Like there was a classic case study saying that there was an election which happened in Belgium. So one of the candidates who was basically like one of the 50 candidates who were contesting, who no one basically gave much chance of doing anything, suddenly showed a tally which says that she's the leader, right? Like they were using electronic voting machines. This is back in '93. So people were like, okay, how can she win the election, right? Right now she's elected anyway, but at that time no one thought that she would win. So they were like tallying the results. So if the number of votes counted and the number of people who voted didn't tally up, right? And the exact difference was what the number of votes this person got. So there was a massive audit to figure out, okay, how did this happen, right? So did someone hack the system? How did this happen? And they finally figured out that like one bit in the 13th register got flipped, and that is 4,000, right? Like, so you get 4,000 more votes when that bit got flipped. And they were thinking, okay, how did this bit get flipped? And then there was a lot of research saying that, okay, this cosmic rays, these are high energy particles which get released from black holes and quasars and those kind of stuff. They are passing through everything, like you and me, you and now. But when they hit a register, the register flips. And obviously, when you are there in space, you are exposed to more cosmic radiation because there's no atmosphere, there is no buildings, there's no things to stop those radiations are getting shielded. So there is no guarantee that when you say I'm writing 2 to a register, it'll still be 2 in the next step, right? So how do you write code now, right? So when we are all saying that, okay, when I store something in a variable and then I read it out, I'm guaranteed that I'm going to read the same value, right? That is how the whole premise of the code is based on. So how do you write a code when you're not guaranteed about the last step? So that was the challenge, right? So to do that, what they do is like. NASA does this, and I think most of the space programs do this. So they have these special boards and processors wherein the same piece of code, line by line, when a clock ticks, gets executed in 3 or 4 processors, right? And then what happens is then there is a coordinating program which says that, okay, does all 3 match? Right, and only then the next step is valid, right? Like, so if the majority of them match, and that is the value. So they are banking on the fact that the cosmic ray will not strike all these registers at the same time to make that bit flip happen in all the processors, right? So that is on the processor level. Same thing, you have to do it at the code level. So when you write an algorithm, you have to write an algorithm in 3 different ways, doing the same thing, but make sure that like if there's a mistake in the algorithm, 2 of the algorithms will be right, 1 of them might be wrong, right? So the bugs are prevented. So that saves lives and satellites and people falling on satellites falling on people. So that was the unique learning for me, right? Saying that like, okay, everything which can go wrong can go wrong. So how do you sort of have triple redundancy? So when I say like, okay, when you sort, like for example, right, like, okay, I'm sorting a thing, I'll sort by bubble sort and I'll sort by quick sort. Like, so there are 2 different algorithms. So if the results are not matching, that means there was a bug in one of them, right? So like that, if you sort of do a triple redundancy, suddenly your code becomes complicated, right? Now you're doing everything 3 times, 3 different ways, and then looking at what happened.
Can I just, sorry, I'm going to have to stop this conversation right now. Can I just jump in and can we just realize how crazy it is what you're talking about? You're talking about writing code that protects itself against black holes and prevents quantum flips happening. Like, what a world we live in. And you're just nonchalantly saying, yeah, we had to just write this code because, you know, these neutrinos get flung off a black hole. So your code is interacting with black holes, and it's just another day.
The code's intentionally not interacting with black holes. I think
exactly. It's trying to protect itself against those interactions. Yeah. Sorry,
it sounds interesting.
Bizarre.
Yeah, it sounds interesting, but I tell people, right, like, it's a miracle. The very life is a miracle, right? Like, I think a single event can sort of wipe us down all out, right? Like, most of the people don't realize it, and we don't realize even the systems which we create or whatever it is are running by a thread, right? Like, so we need to be conscious of that, and there are all multiple ways to prevent that, but that's all we are trying to do, right?
It still doesn't change the fact it's pretty cool. Life is a miracle and all that lot, but you're writing code that fights black holes. It's cool.
But it's interesting, right? Because you're not getting that once that code is shipped. Like, you're not getting it back. Like, there isn't a continuous deployment mechanism to the International Space Station, is there?
Well, there is right now, right? Like, if you followed the stories of Mars rover, that's exactly what happened. They messed up the code. They were able to deploy new code, right? Like, so
it got stuck in the sand or something, didn't it? And they had to figure out how they can get unstuck from sand and things like that. So it's very slow, I can imagine, the process, right?
No, I think not. I don't know about that story, but I know about another story. What happened was They wrote a piece of code, and it takes about, I think, 1.5 years to sort of go to Mars, or 3 years, something like that, right? It's a long time. So they had a process running, which when all the time when they tested it, right, like they didn't figure out that it might be running for what you can say this long, and that process caused a overflow in one of the bits. So by the time the the satellite reached Mars, they had to clean up the code and reboot it, right, because it was not working anymore. Right? So it overflowed their bits, which is available for them to sort of write logs or something.
But I guess that must be an evolution from the code that you wrote that ended up on the ISS, though, right?
Yeah, because right now what happens is most of the things are created, right? They have special purpose compilers which do this automatically, right? Like so basically, when you some things are done at the OS level, some things are done at the hardware level. So when an instruction is sort of read, it is stored 3 times. It is executed in 3 different processors on the motherboard, and then the synchronization happens. So lots of stuff is sort of done for you. So it is sort of shielded for you, like, so you don't have to worry about it. It is the same thing, right? Like when you store a file in say AWS S3, right? Like how many copies are being stored, right? But are you sure that you are going to get the same copy of this thing which was stored? It is not like you're writing to hard disk in only one place, right? Because in order to recover, they are writing it in 3 different zones, in 3 different data centers. And within the data centers, I don't know how many copies gets written of the same piece of code. So we are doing that even in cloud, right? It's not about space. Right now, when you talk to cloud, we do the same thing. There's a replication which happens when you sort of make a call. You know this, Chris, right? Like when we were working, we had hundreds of servers, but now there are thousands of servers. So your request gets executed in multiple servers, and you don't know which response you got from which server, right? So you are already doing the redundancy, which is the same thing, right? So
that's interesting. I suppose that they're building that redundancy into a much smaller, much more contained thing that's sat in a rover on Mars then.
Yeah. So the challenge is they have to they need to their power requirements or the space requirements is the challenge, right? Like, so right now they still use a processor which is quite a couple of generations, multiple generations older than latest processor. The reason why is because they understood the processor, they know how it behaves, and every single pathway has been tested and theoretically verified, right? You know, there is this field called formal verification. That means it's not just about testing, but you have to prove it that it will work, right? So that means they mathematically prove that when this bit is this and one bit this is using a mathematical proof that the answer will always be that. So that's called formal verification. But most of the chip companies do that. Intel started doing that after they had that Pentium bug back in. So formal verification is like, you can imagine, right? It just blows your mind, right? How can you write a theorem to prove that like these bits will always cause this result in your circuit, right? So you are basically solving the whole circuit in a mathematical theoretical fashion to show what will be the inputs and outputs. So
it's such a high level of precision and quality that needs to be met to do that. It's incredible, really. I mean, I'm curious that with the Mars stuff, you've got like Linux and Python running on those on the Mars rover. You know, that's got to be an evolution, a more recent set of software than what you were writing that ended up on the ISS, I presume.
Yes. So frankly speaking, I don't even know what type of operating system or the thing was working. I basically wrote a C program and gave them almost like a code which they compiled on their processors and their compilers. So I don't even know the final product. My thing is to write C. They gave me a particular specification of C which I can use and I can't use. So I had to stick to those statements and write it in a C program. And then they had a compiler which will sort of compile it. So that is the extent of what I know. Right?
So this early experience of like, you know, growing up on an island with a father as a rocket scientist and building, writing code that ends up in space, how has that affected your career? Like, you know, is this something you take in on a daily basis for like how you actually write code or how you teach people how to write code, or, you know, how does it influence you?
See how it affected me. It gave me a good appreciation of what matters, and also it gave me a confidence of like saying that okay, things are not as difficult or as impossible as things can be done, right? Like when people are shooting rockets 1,000 miles up and controlling it, like then when someone says something is not possible, you look at them and ridiculously and say, well, what are you talking about? I have seen people do better things. So it gives me a level of confidence saying that, okay, we can achieve things. That has helped me a lot in my career because nothing was really impossible. I always felt that it is possible to do things. The other thing which gave me is like this kind of checks and balances, right? It gives you an appreciation of what does solidity mean, or what does what you can say when you're talking about precision mean, right? Like this precision and solidity, the appreciation of that, I think, made me a better engineer, right? So
that I think that anything is possible is a really good mantra, I suppose, for everyday working in software engineering, especially because you know, we really do have to solve incredibly difficult problems. Also want to touch on the after we finished working together. Obviously, I'd come out of Amazon to come into Tesco, and then you left Tesco to go into Amazon. So what was that experience like? The contrast from Tesco to Amazon.
Yes, it is a very interesting story, right? Like, so when I was working in UK, as you know, and I was when I came back. I got a call from Amazon saying that, okay, we have a position, will you attend an interview? The reason why I attended the interview was at that time we were talking in Tesco about our revamping the interview process, and there was a lot of talk about, oh, Amazon does this, Amazon does that, this is their process. So I was like more curious, saying that, okay, let me attend the process and get first-hand experience of what their process is going to. I was no intention of seriously pursuing it. So when I went into the interview process, I was curious. I was going through the motions. And then they talked about the system which they were building. So they were trying to build Amazon shipping, which is like almost like similar to FedEx or UPS. And the similar lines, right? Like how AWS was built. Internally, they built some systems, and then they created a service which other people can use that service outside Amazon, create a product out of it. So when they're creating this, and shipping is a multi-billion dollar industry, and Amazon was creating from scratch using the pieces which they have created and offer it as a service. It was very interesting, and I was going to be a part of the initial couple of guys who started this team. So that sort of appealed to me. How does a company like Amazon build a product from scratch using the pieces which they already built, and how do they go into new markets, and how do they develop that? So it was a ride to me, right? So I went from zero to almost like the revenue grew to zero to $600 million in 2 years. Wow. And we launched it in 4 countries. So we launched it in India first, and then China, then in UK, and then finally in US. Now it must have crossed even more than $1 billion in revenue. So creating a product in 2 years which goes close to $1 billion was like a ride, right? Like, and it was a great, interesting journey for me to understand the whole, because I was always on the other side, on the front end side, like basically of the customer journey. So the supply chain of it, which actually makes the e-commerce work, understanding that space, logistics, and how the goods get moved was an interesting journey for me, right? So and working at Amazon scale was an attraction which I wanted to experience.
Well, I'm curious about how like Amazon's I'm going to use their branding, aren't they? Their peculiar ways of working, because that's an Amazon thing for those who aren't familiar. That's part of the culture, absolutely. So when I started at Tesco, I think it's fair to say I pissed a fair number of people off, probably including yourself, because I was young, brash, ego-driven, and had all of this stuff that had come out of Amazon. And then I was coming into Tesco, which at the time, and it's fair to say that it's changed, was quite sort of buttoned up to a large, effect. If there was a problem, they'd get on the phone to IBM largely to say, look, there's a problem with the mainframe. Can you help us fix this problem? Obviously, there were pockets of real innovation that were going on that, you were heavily part of. But I think I definitely, rubbed people up the wrong way with how I was approaching things as such a counterculture, I guess, from Amazon to Tesco. Yeah. And I'm curious about your experience going the other way. Like, how.
Yeah, no, but see, this is what the point I was making, right? So when we started in Tesco and when we were doing it, I remember this, right? In one of the town halls, when I asked something, they said like, "Oh, we are not a retail company. We are not a tech company. We are a retail company." That was the reason why they were not open to some of our ways. But frankly speaking, what you can say, people like you and me should get the credit of taking Tesco where we are, where it is right now, right? Like, because yes, we were always wanting to work in a little bit more agile way, a little bit more what you can say, more digital way, if you can call it, or more the tech way. And that is what Tesco wanted. The reason why they brought us up is in that, right? But obviously you will face resistance from people. Change is always difficult for people, right? And I'll not call it being rubbed a different way. It is like people who have not seen the clarity, right? So for me, going to Amazon was not an what you can say, it was not at all difficult, right? Because earlier, if I see, even for me, like when I came to Tesco, before Tesco, I was actually in Sapient. And Sapient used to work in this way. And before, at Sapient, I was working in finance, in the hedge funds, in what you can say, Citadel, right? Like if you can call rock stars, they are complete rock stars, right? Like, so they were crazy, right? Like, so working with high frequency traders, working in middle of mortgage crisis, trying to evaluate $1 trillion book and calculate real-time risk. So for me, it was like Tesco was like a race car coming to a stop, right? Like that is the kind of feeling. And when I went back to Amazon, I'm like, okay, this is the same mode I used to work in financial services. So since I had experience before, for me, it was not a big change, right? I knew what to expect and what to do, right?
More of a relaxing then, a weight off your shoulders, I guess.
Well, no, it's not to put a weight off my shoulders. It is, sometimes it feels good to move at the pace at which you wanted to move, right? Like,
it fulfilled your need. It fulfilled something that Tesco was suppressing.
So you get excited and this one. And frankly speaking, after all said and done, right, from Amazon, when I moved to Publicis Sapient, sometimes I feel that in Sapient we work a lot faster than Amazon, right? Like people don't realize, like because when you are there in the consulting side, a lot of clients give you a shorter time and they expect miracles, right? Like, so I keep telling to my teams, right, don't underestimate yourself. The speed at which you have moved, I have not seen even inside Amazon people move at this speed, right? So
yeah, well, I think it's generally relative to the maturity of a business. Like, and I don't mean maturity in terms of in terms of capability. I mean maturity in terms of like how long has the business been established? How refined is the product that we're developing? Because I think if you take something like I had the experience of being in Amazon Instant Video pretty close to the start, and obviously you had the experience of doing the Amazon shipping pretty close to the start, and the pace that you go when it's small is pretty damn fast, and then it probably slows as you get bigger because you're resting on your laurels a little bit in each business within Amazon, because Amazon is lots of businesses. And I think for Tesco, because I think you probably only joined about a year or so maybe before I did at Tesco, I'm not sure, mate, but the that when I started there, that was essentially a business that had like probably nearing like, I mean, I don't know what the budget was. It was maybe nearing $1 billion in terms of like the actual budget for the IT department. I mean, that's colossal. And it was such a colossus as an organization. I think that's why it was so slow, because they were developing really, really slowly. And whilst we were there, they found that, mysterious financial black hole of 250 million that had gone missing. From the balance sheet, and the budget went from being $1 billion to being about 100 million. And so when you cut the budget to 1/10 of what it was, that definitely forces some change, which I think is what sort of helped it to bounce back. Obviously, they'd gone and hired people like yourself and people like me and all the rest to try and spin it into being more of a technology business. And I actually caught up with a couple of people from Tesco just before the pandemic started, and they've moved on massively. I walked into that office in Welwyn Garden City because I'd been doing some work over the road at Paypoint, and it's all changed. Like, even the office has changed. Like, there's not a suit in sight. It's all bright colours everywhere, and everyone's wearing T-shirts, and they're carrying their MacBooks under their arm. It's a totally different place. And I think, when we were there, we would have had to stick around for a long time to see that juggernaut turn the corner. But we were there at the start. I think we helped it change, and it's quite satisfying to see. But I think it's very much dependent or relative to the size and the pace of the business, I'd say.
Yeah. So, but I tell people this, right? It's not about a company as a whole, right? Even within Amazon, I always say that, right? There are like three types of if you can call it a life cycle of projects which you go through, right? Like the projects which are starting up right now, which are always exciting, fast paced, you get the resources what you want, and you are trying to shoot to the moon, right? And all those kinds of stuff, like everyone is excited. And then comes the next phase, right? And everyone talks about, okay, now that you're built and you got the thing, where is my bottom line, right? Like how much profit is generating. So they sort of drive on capturing market share and trying to sort of tighten, saying that, do we really need to do this? Do we need to really do that? That question starts getting asked. And then there's a third phase wherein, like, it is all about, okay, do I really need this system anymore? But I still need to keep it running because so many people are dependent upon it, but no one wants to work on it. The teams are basically tired or like not exciting work because they are keeping the lights on and trying to get every dollar accounted for, right? And even within Amazon, we had teams like that, right? We had things. I remember, like, when I was especially working, I had to get a very small change done from one of the teams, and I was like, I couldn't understand, right? Saying that, okay, why is this team taking so much time, or like there's so much process involved in trying to get something changed from that particular process. And then I realized, right, like that team was in the third phase, right? Like no one cares about the team, but everyone depends upon the team, right? Like, and no one wants to work on it because they get incremental changes, and they work in a very, and they need to be more careful. Let me be more respectful, right? Like that, they need to be more careful. And that is what happens with a lot of traditional companies, right? They build this multi-billion-dollar enterprises over 100 years. So either they're being more cautious or they don't want to disrupt anything. And people feel that, oh, these guys are moving slow, they don't react, and all those, because they're afraid, right? They're going to collapse the whole thing what they built over 100 years. So the same way, right? I think it is not about a company as a whole. It is what stage your product is in and what stage your team is going through. So if you can always find something to have different parts of your product in different modes, that is the ideal combination. So I keep on telling my team, saying that, okay, which part of the features are in startup mode, which parts of the features are there in consolidate and build and scale mode, and which parts of the things are there in retire mode, right? And you need to have all three parts. So then the team is exciting, right? But if the team is working only on new features, like they're only doing shiny things, right? Like they don't care how much it costs, what it does, right? What is the implication? Or if they're working only in the lights on thing, they're bored, right? No one wants to work in the team. They just wants to sort of, they'll put too many processes and nothing moves, right? So,
but how do you then close the loop on that? So, because you can visualize that as a linear direction of like.
So my thing is, I always look at the backlog and very clearly identify the features. I classify the features or the nature of work which a team is doing into these three phases, no matter what they're doing, right? It applies to it. So there should be some part which is exciting and new. There should be some part which is how do you sort of build and scale up, expand. The features are basically expansive. The other part of work is basically optimize and reduce, right? So if the backlog is skewed in only one or versus the other, that is what I try to intervene, right? And that's what I try to audit, right? And it happens in everywhere, right? Including architecture, right? Including architecture, I put this lens, saying that, okay, because some architects try to create all the new things, right? They'll take every single crowd service which is coming new, they put crypto in this, they put you name it, they put it all on it and say, okay, this is the architecture we need to build because this is the future architecture. But that's not viable, right? Like you should have some new parts. There should be some dependable, tested and tried and tested parts, and there are some parts you need to figure out how do you sort of remove them, right? So that balance should be there. And yeah, as I get older, I started believing more and more in balance, and that is the only way you can keep it surviving.
But how do you then take something that's in retirement mode and bring it back around to startup? Do you have to sort of disrupt? Because, we were talking just before about Tesco and how we probably were able to help the whole organization go from almost retirement mode back into disrupt, that startup mode. How do you look for certain triggers,
Yeah. See, what I look for is, or more, I'll put it like what I'll try to do, right? You always try to dismantle and reassemble. So what we did in Tesco is exactly the same thing, right? We were structured in certain way. We completely changed those structures. We said that, okay, we are going to realign teams as products and services. But we still had legacy pieces. We didn't like sort of overnight throw it all away, right? But what we said is like every team will now, after this restructuring, every team will get something new to build. Every team has to maintain some legacy stuff which they need to sort of retire or something. And every team had to make more efficient as the budget has decreased. Like they need to sort of do something more with what they already have, right? Like so that way, one way I'll try to do it is basically break and dismantle the pieces. So basically break the organization structure and create new organization structures. That's one way of doing it, so that like you distribute the pain and distribute the newness across the people, right? The other way I'll sort of do is, again, wait for the windows of clarity. And that is something which you can't really create. Like I talked to you about like COVID, like disruptors, right? What are the kind of disruptors you can create to change an organization behavior? Some things which we did, like for example, in Tesco, you remember, right? Like we went and changed the titles and told people that, okay, this is your new behavior we expect from this new titles. We didn't change the people, we changed the titles. That is a disruptive event which we created to tell people like, okay, we want you to operate in a different way, right? The same way I did the same thing even in what you can say in Sapient, right? Like we changed the way the teams are behaving by changing their roles and responsibilities. So that gives a newer impotence and newer incentive for people to work in a different way. And that is the disruptive things which you need to create. If that answers your question.
So creating that.
Well,
in
so
Amazon,
create the disruption, right?
Yeah, they think they referred to it in the Amazon techniques was to create dissatisfaction was your trigger point. If you can create like a positive dissatisfaction that everybody gets fed up that they could be doing something better, that's a trigger point.
Yeah. The other thing which I try to do is, if something is painful, I read it in a DevOps book. I'm forgetting the name. It's a very famous one. Say if something is painful, make the teams do more of it, not less of it, right? So they will find a way to change that, right? So and that came from saying that, okay, if the teams are doing a lot of manual tasks in say a CI, like in a continuous integration, right? So the book basically talks about ask the team to do 10 builds a day, right? And you will know that within 2 weeks they'll automate 10 of their tasks, right? Like they'll no longer be doing manually, right? But if you're asking them to do only 1 build every week, they'll never automate, right? So,
yeah, I think that's a good point. Make people do something that they don't like, and then they will find a way to fix the problem. Well, go on.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, yeah, basically the statement I'll attribute to, I think he's one of the pioneers in DevOps movement, right? So he said, like, if something is painful, make people do more of it, right? So,
yeah, it's a good impetus for change, doing something uncomfortable. Try and stay outside of your comfort zone. Anyway, on that point, I think that's probably a good point to wrap up. So, I mean, thank you for your time today, Rakesh. It's been great to talk to you again, and we've covered a lot. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, and this definitely has been an interesting discussion, and I got to revisit some of my old days.
I know I feel inspired for the rest of the day now. I'm ready to go on and do 2 hours of coding in the midst of trying to coax people through meetings.